So you've been voguing for the camera and showing off your best poses, but now you're wondering, how do I store images locally in SwiftData? Well, in this SwiftData tutorial, we'll be carrying on with our to-do list app course that we've been working on, and we'll be looking at how to store images locally into SwiftData using the SwiftUI PhotoPicker. As you can see on the screen here, where I'm actually creating a to-do with an image. We'll also discuss the best practices in terms of storing images too, since you don't, trust me, you don't want your local storage to grow in size because there's too much data. So let's jump into this video. All right, cool. So like I said before, we're going to be carrying on with our to-do list app, tutorial series that I've been doing on my channel. And what we want to do now is actually add pictures into our app. So we need to save these images. Now, when you're working with images, you actually don't save the image type, but what you do is you actually save data. So essentially an image is a bunch of bytes, so a bunch of data that you store in your database or persistent storage, whatever you want to call it. Now, in our case, in order to actually access these photos, we're going to be using a SwiftUI component called PhotosPicker, which is a new component. So let's add this in and just see what this looks like. So the first thing we're going to need to do is actually go to our screen where we actually allow someone to create a to-do, which is here. And I'm just going to do that now by going to the view, and I have got too many tabs open at the moment. So let's just close all them. Let's go to modify to do. All right, boom, cool. Now, well, I'm not going to be using the previews because for some reason in Xcode 15 beta 6, the previews are back to what they were before, but they're not working. So we're stuck with the simulator. But what we're going to do is import the Photos UI. And this framework basically gives us a photo picker for free. So we don't really need to build our own custom component, which is why we're using this. Now, there is one thing to note with this. This Photos Picker doesn't allow you to basically take a picture with the camera as well for free. So if you want that, you're going to actually add in your own custom solution. This just lets you pick a photo that's stored on your device. So below our section here, where you can actually basically select a category. So we just go here. So here we want to add an option to choose a photo. So I'm just going to type this out. So with the photo picker, you can see that it takes some parameters here. This is only a few of them, by the way. It's not all of them, but the ones we're going to be using is selection, which lets us bind to some kind of selection that someone has made. We want to specify what someone can select. So we're matching any images. And we're also going to use the shared photo library as well by default. Now in this closure here, we can specify a label that we actually want to show. Well, not a label, but a view that we want to show on the screen. And in our case, we're going to use a label here. So when you tap on this, it will show our photo picker. Now, we don't actually have our selection bound to anything at the moment now. So what we need to do is actually create a property, well, a state property for holding our selection that someone has tapped. And also as well, a property for basically converting our selection that someone has made into data so we can store that later on. So at the top here, below our state properties, I'm just going to create two new properties for holding those two, variables that we need. So with the selected photo, this is the photo item that our picker is going to bind to. So whatever someone selects is going to be stored in this variable here. So this is the type that it uses. And then later on, what we're going to do is actually listen to the selected photo and then convert that into data, which will be stored into here so we can manipulate and work with that. Now, down below here in our picker, well, not pickup, down below here in our photos picker, you can tell that I've just woken up, and I've not had my sausage and egg butty, right? If you're not from the UK, I'll put it on the screen here, but if you come down to the UK, especially Manchester, try one. And if anyone tells you that it's not called a butty, they're lying to you. Anyway, so let's replace this with selected photo. Cool. And then now what we need to do is actually listen to changes for this state property. Now there's two ways of doing this. One way of doing it is by using the onChange modifier, but when you're actually converting a image from, well, a selected photo to data, it actually uses an asynchronous function. And if you don't know what I mean by that, I have it all explained in my Swift concurrency course, which I'll put on the screen here. But essentially it works with async await. So rather than us actually using the onChange modifier and then putting a task within that, what we can actually do instead is use the task modifier, and there's a property that allows us to listen to changes that happen on a state property. Now, if you just scroll all the way down, I'm going to collapse this toolbar, but if you just scroll down to the bottom here, I'm going to type here task, and you'll see that there's an option here called ID, and this allows us to perform an asynchronous function whenever a value changes. So we'll use this. So in here, we'll choose selected photo, and we'll just use the closure here like so. Now, when you're working with this API and you're working with selected, well, when you're working with the photo picker item, there's actually a function on this actual, API that allows you to convert the photo to data, which we'll use now. So we're going to say here, if let data, and because this function can throw, we need to use the try keyword, but I'm just going to use the optional. So if it fails, this just won't pass. We're going to say here, selected photo, and there's a function, pause. And we're going to say await. And there's a function here on the selected photo called load transferable type. And what this will do is it will actually attempt to basically convert this object into whatever we specify in the type here for the transferable protocol. Now the type that we want to work with is data. So we're going to say here data dot self like so. Cool. All right. So now we have our selected photo and it's going to try and load it of type data. So convert it into a data object for us. So we want to store this in our selected photo data like so and say data. All right. Boom. So now we're able to access this and convert it. Now, what we also want to do is I want to add in a view here that basically gives you a preview to show you that there's an image, the image that you selected so you can actually see it on the screen. So above our label here, where we're going to have our photo picker, we're just going to write some code that unwraps that data property and then sets it to a image in SwiftUI. So you can see here, I've not done anything too crazy. I'm just unwrapping the data, creating a UI image, and then setting that to the image property in SwiftUI, well, the image view in SwiftUI, and then just applying some styles onto it. Okay, cool. So now let's just test this out quickly. And when we run this on the simulator, you'll now see that if I create a new to-do, and you'll see our option here to add an image. So if we tap on this, we get our photo picker. And then these are all just default pictures on the simulator. But if you had pictures on your phone, you can see them. Obviously, I'm not going to show you my phone yet because I've got too many pictures of me on a night out. So I don't think you need to see me with my eyes in two different directions when I've had too many shots. So we're going to leave that one out in it. So I'm going to choose this. And now you can see here that we've got our picture of our flowers. But the problem that we've got now is that there's actually no way for us to actually remove this picture. We can only add a new picture every time. I can't just remove this unless I dismiss and then, restart it again. So to make the UX a bit better, we're going to add a button just underneath here where if there is an image, will allow someone to remove this image and just reset this. So in order to do this, it's not crazy. It's quite simple. All we need to do is just basically check to see if our data state property has some kind of value. So we're going to say here, if selected photo data is not equal to nil, so that means that there's something inside of this variable, then we'll add a button here to allow us to remove this image. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. So as you can see here, we've got our button and I've set the role of it to be destructive. So the text by default is, red. My brain isn't working this morning. I'm having too many dirt moments, man. But basically, you can see here that within this closure block, we've got the with animation, and we're just basically going to reset our state properties back to nil. And for our label, we're just going to show an X mark and some text saying remove image. Now, the reason why I'm using a foreground style of red here is because even though you set the role destructive to red, the SF symbol doesn't get set to red as well. It's only the text. Now, I don't know if this is an Xcode beta bug or if this is by intention, but I'm just doing this for safety. So let's just run this again. And then now we'll go on the new to do and we'll add an image again. And now you'll see that we have our remove image button. So if I tap on this button to remove the image, it removes the image and we basically go back to normal. So right now we only actually have the image being stored locally within our create, to do view here. But what we need to do is actually put this into our model. Now, I said before, when you're working with, when you're working with images, you actually want to store them as data. And in SwiftData, one of the data types that you're allowed to have is type data. So all we need to do is go into our model. So if I go into my item here, and we'll just go into our model, and we're going to have a new property here called image. And its type is going to be data. Now, one thing we do want to do is actually make this optional. And the reason why we want to make this optional is because if we don't, what we're essentially saying is that every single to-do must have some kind of image associated with it. And we have to create a data instance for every single to-do. Now, by making this optional, it will be nil by default, and we can set it to something if we want to. And something that's really important, which we'll look into later in the video, is working with data, because if you don't work with data properly, it's actually possible for your app to grow massively in size and slow down with performance. But what we want to do now is back in our create to do view, rather than us having the state property for selected photo data, we actually want to use the image property. We actually want to use the image property that we just created within our model. So let's remove the state variable. And if we build our project now, we should have a whole bunch of errors, which is fine. Well, it's sweet, but it's not sweet. But what we just need to do is just replace this with our, item.image throughout. So here, where we have our selected photo data, we're just going to say image. Oh, damn. That was smart. I didn't think it'd do that. Bloody hell. All right, okay. Well, that's a cool Xcode feature. So we'll replace this with our image data. I'm just going to rename that to image data. And then rather than being selected photo data, it'll be item.image, like so. And then we'll set our item.image to nil here as well. And then just down below, we'll also set it here. Cool. So now we're going to be using our model to basically store this data into our persistent storage. Let's just run this and see what happens. And if we create a new to-do, I'm just going to say here, go buy new MacBook. Okay, cool. And then I'm just going to leave the date. Well, we'll just choose a random date in the future, like the 13th. And then we'll say it's important. We won't give it a category. But on the image, we'll just select this flowers. Actually, let's say go buy flowers. Okay, cool. And then now we can either create here or choose done, but let's go here, create, and that'll save that. So we actually have our to do here, go buy flowers. And this is now saved our image into our storage, which is what we want. But you'll see now that we're actually not able to see our image on the home screen here because we're not actually grabbing it and displaying it, which is what we'll look into soon. Now, something else that we'll also be looking into is some UI and UX improvements, such as adding in a photo and image viewer, as well as how to update our image, because right now we're only adding our image picker to our create and not to our update screen. So we'll see how to update our data. We'll see how to update our image data in SwiftData, and we'll also look at some improvements for our app to boost its performance and also storage as well, which is super important that you don't want to miss. So we'll look at that at some point within this video too. So make sure you stick around. Now, if you're enjoying this video so far, I really appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. And as well, let me know in the comment section below with what other videos you're interested in seeing. So right now, we don't really show our image onto the screen. So what I want to do is just below here where we have our time, I want to show like a little preview of that image. Now, in order to do that, we're going to need to go to our content view, which is our home screen here. And where we actually have our H stack, we actually want to wrap this within a V stack so that we can stack this and that image below each other. So I'm just going to create a V stack like so. And then we're just going to cut this and then paste it here. Now I'm going to collapse the H stack again, because what we want to do below this H stack is actually now load the picture below here. So what we've done here now is we've just got our item.image. So the image from a property, we can unwrap that, we'll create a UI image and then set that to our image property here. And I've just got some styles on it for like the size, so the maximum height, and just clipping it with a, with a rounded rectangle. So let's just run this and see what happens. And now we can see our image that we stored in SwiftData just by grabbing it. So not a lot of work so far, but we're able to now actually save it and also fetch it. But something we're not able to do is actually update this image, because if I actually swipe across here and go to edit, we actually don't have a way to update the image. And the nice thing about what it is that, we've built so far is that I don't need to do anything different when working with SwiftData, because when you're updating properties, all you need to do is just I should prefix this. As long as you have autosave enabled, all you need to do is just basically update that model. And once you update a property in that model, it automatically gets updated and saved for you. So all we need to do is just literally update our item. Now in this update view here, you'll see that we actually have a property here called bindable, a bindable property wrapper here, which allows us to basically bind our item to this view. So any changes we make through this item will automatically be updated and saved within SwiftData. So we just need to copy our code from our, create screen into here. So what I'm just gonna say here is obviously import photos UI. And if I just go to the modify, so our create screen, we want to take our selected photo here. So we'll copy this. And then we'll also paste that here where our overstate property is. And then I'm just going to lift the entire section that we created before, where we basically show the image, add the photo picker and a remove button. So we'll collapse this. I'll just copy it. And then all we need to do is just literally just paste this above the section where we have the update button. And then finally, what we want to do is just add in our task modifier. So where we have our task modifier here, we'll just copy this. And then below our on appear, we'll paste this like so. Cool. So let's just run this and see what happens. So with our to do here, if I just scroll across and then go to edit, you'll see now that we have our photo picker. What I could do is I can remove the image and update, and you'll now see that the image goes away. We could actually edit it again. And this time I can choose a different image. So we'll choose a different set of flowers. So we'll just choose this. Well, it's not flowers, but leaves in it. And then we'll choose update. And it updates to that image. And then finally, to show you one more time, if I was to choose a different image, like this waterfall, and then choose update, you'll now see that it updates here as well. So we've got our create, we've got our read working, and we've got our update working as well. Now, one thing that you might have realized here is that it doesn't actually show the full image, so it just shows us a little bit of a snippet. So what I want to do is I actually want to have it where if you tap on this image, it opens up a image viewer where I can actually, interact with it, like zoom in and all that kind of stuff. Now, for this video, I'll be honest with you, I don't want to build it from scratch because it'll get super long. So what we're going to do instead is actually use a third-party library instead to actually help speed up development. And in cases like this is where I would justify using a third-party library to help you speed up the development of your app. Now, the library that we're going to be using is this library here called SwiftUI ImageViewer, which you can see the GitHub here and the user. And we're just going to use Swift Package Manager to add this to our project. So in order to actually add a package, to your project, all you need to do is just go to the project here. And then when your project is selected, go to package dependencies and then hit the plus button. And then here, you should see on the screen here, the URL. That's where you want to copy it from the documentation. And then now we'll just basically paste that in here and then press enter and then wait for it to download it. And now when you type that in, you should now see the package here. So it's got the installation and obviously how to use it and whatnot. So it's quite a nice and simple package for us to easily add into our project to get this for free. So I'm just going to add this package. And we'll add the package here like so. And now you should see on package dependencies that the library is in your project. So if we go to our content view, in order to actually use this, if we just go to the documentation, you'll see here that you need to import SwiftUI ImageViewer, and then we need to add some kind of tap gesture to the image. This could be a button as well if you wanted to, but we need some kind of action to toggle a state property. And then we're going to use a modifier to display the actual, image on our app. And then you can add overlays for buttons and whatnot. So let's do this now. So in our app here, in our main content view, we're first of all going to import the library called SwiftUI ImageViewer, like so. Cool. And then we're going to create a new state property within our view for presenting the image viewer. So we're just gonna have this here called is image viewer presented, and by default it will be false. Now, what we want to do is if we scroll down to where our image is, if there is an image, then we're going to attach a tap gesture to this image. So we're just going to say here dot tap gesture perform. And then we're now going to say here is image viewer presented is equal to true. Okay, cool. All right, cool. And if you just go back to the documentation, you'll see here that you have a full screen cover, and you need to pass, you need to use the view within this block here. So after our tap gesture, we're going to say full screen cover is presented, is image view presented, and then we're going to use the SwiftUI image viewer. And then for the image here, we're just going to pass in a image like we have done here. So we're going to use this here. So we're going to copy this, put that in here like so. Cool. And then because when this gets presented, it doesn't have a close button by default. So we're going to use an overlay. And then we're going to set the alignment to be top trailing, and then the content in here. And then we're going to need to build a close button. Now I'm going to be a bit lazy. I was going to copy this from the documentation and then just paste that in here. Change this to is image viewer presented to false. And then change the tint from purple to blue, like so. Okay, cool. Sweet. So let's just run this and see what happens. Cool. And as you can see now, you can see here that we actually have the image. And if I tap on it this time, we now get an image viewer like so. And if we wanted to, we can actually like do actions. I can't remember this on my phone yet, but if I wanted to, I could actually get pretty much all of this for free, which is pretty cool. Sweet. Now, so far, you might think that we're done, but we're actually not done. There actually is one small improvement that we can also make as well to our app, and that is within our model. So let us go into our model. Right now, we're actually saving our images data to the model, but the problem is that we're actually saving the data directly into SwiftData's storage. Now, there's a few problems with this, and the first problem is that if you have a whole load of images, your persistent storage will get pretty big pretty quick because you're storing a whole bunch of data alongside your model. Now, what you want to do instead is actually save your image somewhere else externally, and then your data would, well, your app would actually reference that data from within an external storage to help reduce the size of your application. Now, something you can do in order to actually easily do that in SwiftData is use an attribute, and there's actually a property on the attribute to specify that you want this to be externally stored somewhere else. Now, if we say at attribute, there's a property here called options, and on the options, there's something here called external storage. And as you can see here, it says it stores the property's value as a binary data adjacent to the model storage. So that means that this won't be saved directly within SwiftData. There'll be a reference to it in SwiftData, and it will be stored somewhere else. So we definitely want to use this. So if you're ever working with data, make sure that you add this. Now, another preface is in the beta version, there's actually like a warning that this doesn't work properly, sometimes. So by the time the, proper release comes out, this should be all sorted. So now if we run this, so let's just delete this, and then we'll just create a new to do here called go hiking or something. And we'll go and do that next weekend. In routine, add an image. We'll add some hills, then we'll create. Cool. And now you can see that we have our category and we have our image, and you won't see it now, but basically this image is now being stored externally somewhere else, and we can interact with it, and it's all good. Sweet. So now we saw how to, save images, how to read images, how to update images within SwiftData. We've also started to add a nice library to help speed up our development for adding in a simple, photo viewer into our app. And we've also looked at how to improve the performance of our app by using the attributes property to store data externally. So I hope you've learned a lot in this video. Also, as well, if you want to learn more about SwiftData, I actually do have this playlist that you can see on the screen here. And if you want to learn more about iOS development, then check out the courses on my website, which you can actually see in the description box below. That's everything from me. I'll catch you on a bit. Deuces.